All right, let's go. So yesterday we ended Nehemiah 5, if you can see it. We ended at verse 13. So we'll pick up at verse 14. Remember what was going on, we'll retrack in a minute, but here we go, 14. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes. So 20th to 32nd, so 12 years. 12 years Nehemiah was the governor of Jerusalem, of Judah. 12 years, neither I nor my brothers, in 12 years, I nor my brothers ate the food allowance to the governor. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people and took from them for their daily rations 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants lorded it over the people. But I did not do so because of the fear of the Lord. I also persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now what was prepared at my expense for each day was 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, birds, and every 10 days, all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all of this, I did not demand the food allowance of the governor, because the service was too heavy on his people. Remember for my good, oh my God, all that I've done for this people. Did you hear that? Bro fed 150 people a day of his own expense. He didn't tax the people. He didn't take what the people had been used to giving. He didn't buy any land. Verse 14 says, moreover is a therefore. Remember what happened up leading to this? The people were taxed to death. They were taxed to death to the point their interest rates were insane. Their children were enslaved. Their lands were mortgaged to the hilt. Their crops were mortgaged. They were refinancing their homes. They were refinancing their land just to pay for the mortgage that they had to start with. That's what was happening. And Nehemiah said, I didn't do that. 150 people a day, an ox a day, 6 choice sheep a day, not sheep a day, poultry. Do the math on this. He didn't take 40 shekels a day from the people. He lived there 12 years, 365 days in a year, times 12, times 40. And Nehemiah didn't take that. He did all of this at his own expense, which what does that tell you about Nehemiah? What did that tell you about the wealth of Nehemiah? What did that tell you? What does that tell you about the king's support of Nehemiah? That the king, we're actually introduced here that King Artaxerxes made Nehemiah the governor of the area. Nehemiah was the governor of Judah, of the people in Judah. And he dealt fairly with them there. See, this is good leadership. This is God-honoring leadership. And how many of you deal with people who do not demonstrate this kind of generosity? How many of you deal with banks or have dealt with banks like I have, who have set on approvals for months at a time so the interest rates will keep going up in their favor? How many banks did this practice between mid 2020 to late 2023? How many do you know did this? How many of you experienced this? And this is what Nehemiah is talking about. How many of you have worked more jobs at one time in the past few years of your life just to pay the bills than at any other time in your life, and still by the grace of God you barely made it. Say I. How many of you have done that? How many of you have started new businesses just because you know there's resources in this business, but you need this so that you can cover the note on the other business? If you've done that, say I. Nehemiah is he's such a godly leader. 150 people a day he's feeding. Every 10 days he's bringing out the choice wine, a variety of wines. They're having a party. The wall is rebuilt. Nehemiah's focused. He got it done. He's after it. He's a good leader. He's a godly leader. He's a wealthy man. Nehemiah is a wealthy man to be able to do this. How many of you today, it's Friday, the 15th of November, how many of you could bring 150 people? How many of you could host 150 people in your home? Right? Not to mention feed them. This was Nehemiah. We need to get an idea of the kind of man Nehemiah was. Nehemiah was a goodly man. He was a God-honoring man. He was a God-fearing man. He feared God before and above any. The God of Nehemiah, for Nehemiah, was Nehemiah's highest authority. And this is Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a goodly man. He's a godly man. And day after day, he did this. Day after day, he did not take the 40 pieces of shekels from the people, the silver. Day after day, he refused the temptation to purchase land. He refused that. It's for the people there. See, Nehemiah, in many regards, Nehemiah was a foreigner in his own land. Because see, Nehemiah came from the citadel of Susa with King Artaxerxes. Nehemiah, in so many ways, even though he was of Judean descent, he was not of Judah. He came from the citadel of Susa, from the capital of the world. And Nehemiah went to a place that was depressed and impoverished, and it lay in ruins. And Nehemiah and all of the resources of the king of the land were at Nehemiah's charge. And God gave Nehemiah this favor. God gave Nehemiah such favor. Nehemiah was more than a policymaker. He was more than a lawmaker. He was more than a law enforcer. He was more than a protector of the people. I don't want to make more of Nehemiah than what Nehemiah was, because Nehemiah, after all, at the end of the day, was only a man. But what a man he was. What a man Nehemiah was. Not only did he say to those who were attacking the city, good luck, guys. Because in one hand, we're going to build the wall, and in the other hand, we're going to beat you back. That's Nehemiah. That's Nehemiah. That's what Nehemiah said to those who came to attack. Nehemiah said to Sanballat and Tobiah, what are you talking about? I'm not going to join you out in the plain. We have a great work to do. This is Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a goodly man. Nehemiah was a godly man. Nehemiah was in many ways so much like David. He was a man after God's own heart. And there's something here that I like. At the tail end of chapter 5, it's in verse 19. And we'll see this later in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah says, remember for my good, oh my God, all that I've done for this people. Remember for my good, oh God. God, I'm not always getting it right. Sometimes I mess up. I get a little angry when Sanballat and all of them start yelling across the wall. And you know what? I prayed, God, that you would take their curses and that you would turn it on their heads, and that you would not forgive them, and that you would cast them into the outer darkness, and that God, that I'm thinking about the language of Hebrews now. Our God is a consuming fire. God, just consume them. Eat them up, chew them up, don't leave anything left of them, both them, their descendants, wipe them off the face of the planet. There's no use for them. I mean, you ever felt that way? You ever felt that way when you look out in culture and you see political pundits advocating to confuse little boys to become little girls and little girls to become little boys? Have you ever seen that when you have political pundits who would decimate your defenses and allow your enemies to come in and destroy you and take advantage of your children and take advantage of all your family? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt God obliterate them? God cast them out? God do not forgive them? God like rain, you know what I'm saying? Like Lord rain fire from heaven on their faces. You ever felt that way? You ever felt that? I've felt that way. I have. In many respects, I still feel that way. I still feel that way. Could you imagine being the 12-year-old girl with the guys from this Venezuelan gang who illegally crossed the border, were apprehended and then let go, went and terrorized a suburb of Denver, and in their terrorizing of this suburb, kidnapped, gang raped, brutally attacked, beaten, and murdered a young 12-year-old girl? I mean, honestly, guys, it makes you want to lay hands on people for the wrong reasons. And this is why I resonate. This is why I love the heart of Nehemiah. Because he says, remember for my good, oh my God, all that I've done for this people. Remember for my good, oh my God, all that I've done for this people. Remember for my good, oh my God. Because Lord, I want to do right here. I truly want to do right. But there is a fire in me, Father. There is a zeal in me, Father, for this people. There is a zeal in me, Father. I am consumed with, Father, I want to do right. I have a job to do. I have a job to protect our kids. I have a job to protect our families. I have a job to protect our workforce. I have a job to protect the sanctity of this nation. I have a job to protect, to defend, to uphold. And I'm also going to party. Every 10 days, every night, 150 people around this table. I bet you Nehemiah was just one of the guys, man. But he was also probably, I bet you he was one of those guys that even the crowd could be in a ruckus and he would stand up and everyone in the room get quiet. That's Nehemiah. That's what it means to be a godly, a goodly man. That's what it means to be a strong leader. I bet you the people at the table didn't even all know one another. They were only there because of their relationship with Nehemiah. They were making connections with one another because of the connection, the shared connection that they have with Nehemiah. Have you ever been that guy? Have you ever been the guy that had a dozen or so people around the table? Not any of them knew one another, but they knew you, and that's why they came, because they knew you. And they gathered together to think about something or to figure out something or to work through something or to talk through something or to process something. And by the end of the evening, they were all new friends with one another. They met friends they didn't even know they had because of their affiliation and their relationship with Nehemiah. Because Nehemiah is that godly man. He's that goodly man. He's that righteous man. Do you understand? Where are the men like this in our culture today? Where are the men like this in our culture today? Do you know a man that needs to hear this? Do you know a man who's consumed with absolute greed? He's consumed with self-centered greed. He's consumed with the bottom line of his bank account. He's consumed with the bottom line of his checking accounts. He's consumed with what kind of car he drives. He's consumed with what he looks like. Do you know this guy? Do you know this complete tool of a guy? See, that's not what it means to be a righteous man. That's not what it means to be a godly and a goodly man. That's not what it means to be a God-fearing man. A God-fearing man puts others above the needs of himself because he knows that God's got him. And if God's got me, then I don't need anything else from anyone if God's got me. If God is on the throne, He's got me. He will bless me with resources that I didn't even know were available. He will stretch out my arms in such a way. He will give me influence in a way that I never saw coming because God's got me. Do you know that man? That's a godly man. That's a goodly man. That was Nehemiah. That's the man I want to be like. That's a man with a fire in his belly. That's a man with a fire in his bones. That's a man who I once heard a Tom Bilyeu say, the Quest protein bar guy. We did an event. I heard Tom say, you've got to run so hard after your passion and after your purpose that it's like a man with his hair on fire, and you've got to run through a herd of hippopotamuses to get through the pond, to dip your head, to get it, to put out the fire. Do you know that guy? Do you know that person who is running so hard after their passion and so hard after their dream and so hard after the glory of God, so hard after all that God had put in their heart to do? Do you know that guy? Like, that's the guy I want to be like, man. I want to be like Nehemiah in those regards. Nehemiah's a godly man. He's a goodly man. He's a man on fire for God. He's not a selfish man. He's not a self-centered man. He's so full of purpose. He's not a man who needs anything from anybody else. He has his own resources. That's Nehemiah. So let's offer a prayer. Father, in a world of weak, confused men, you are the model. Your son, Jesus, in every way was the perfect man. In every way, Jesus was tempted just like us, yet without sin. Father, burn in us, Lord. Burn in us a passion for your glory. Burn in us, brand us with your Holy Spirit, your consuming fire, so that we'll run hard after you with all of our might and all of our strength, all of our faculties, all of the tools and resources at our disposal, that, Father, that we would bring glory to you. Father, today in our world, raise up men, raise up Nehemiahs to rebuild for your glory. In Jesus' good name, amen.